Hey, welcome back to Dear Baseball Gods. I'm your host, Dan Blewett, and I have a great guest today. Jimmy Gonzalez is joining me, and he is a coach in the Cubs farm system. For 2019, he will be managing in High A, which is the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. So he was last year with the South Bend Cubs in the Midwest League, so he made a jump up, got a promotion. So he is the High A manager in Myrtle Beach this upcoming season. And Jimmy has a ton of baseball experience. So dating back to his draft year, he was a 40th overall pick in the 1991 Major League Baseball draft. Went on to play 14 seasons in pro baseball with the Astros, Padres, Expos, and Mets. He also spent 4 seasons of winter ball in the Dominican Republic, capturing 2 Caribbean Series titles. And if you don't know, the Dominican Winter League is a exceptional winter league. That's where obviously many of the Dominican major leaguers play, many of the upcoming players play, lots of the top upcoming American players. They'll play winter ball in the DR, trying to get more exposure and to be in front of all these major league scouts, and just to play pretty much the highest level of baseball possible in the winter when everyone else is in the off season for the majors. So he clearly grinded out a lot of years in addition to those 14 seasons. 140 games, and then he's going to go out and play another 40, 50 in the DR every winter. So it just shows you how much he loved the game and just how often he was behind the plate. So as I mentioned that, he was a catcher, so I'm super excited to hear his perspective on the game. As I'm sure you all know, the catcher is referred to often as the general. He is the guy that sees everything, can survey the entire field. So when you see a manager who's a former catcher, you know that they have a really unique perspective on the game. Having called pitches, having hit, having surveyed and controlled the entire field, for such a long time. So he's going to have some really great insight on pitching, on catching, on how to help young players focus on the right things as they're trying to develop as catchers and just as players in general. So without further ado, here is Coach Jimmy Gonzalez. Hey, Jimmy, how is the East Coast treating you?
Dan, how are you? The East Coast is not too bad right now. We just had some bad weather that just went by us the last few days, but it's actually a little bit on the mild side. We're in the 40s now, 50s, so that's helping all this snow melt. So not too bad right now.
That's good. You guys are lucking out. Well, number one, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. I know
Thanks
people out here in the Midwest are eager to hear a little more from the Cubs Nation out here. I'm pretty much equidistant between Chicago and St. Louis, so depending on which kid I'm working with in the academy, they're either a Cubs fan or a Cardinals fan. So I know they're always interested to hear about the pipeline and who's helping their beloved Cubs, get back to glory again. Of course, I was talking with one of the little kids I was working with the other day. I'm like, you've never lived in a time where the Cubs weren't good. I'm like, how weird is that? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you don't even know the history of the Cubs. And that's got to be a privilege. Can you speak a little bit to your time? So you've been with the Cubs for the 4 seasons now. This is your 7th season as manager.
This is my 7th season. Yes.
And you
I came in the year after Theo came in. So once they made a lot of changes in the organization, so there's been a lot of new staff members. It's kind of how they're revamping the whole, just the whole minor league system. That's where you start the player development, the scouting, because we see this result at the big league level, but all that honestly is starting from the scouting department first and foremost. They're the guys who are out there scouting, getting these players, and then they hand them over to the player department. Player development, and we then take these guys and mold them into what they are. We have a philosophy on how we're trying to just play the game. They have the ability, but it's okay. How can we play the game? How can we get the best out of these guys? So seeing that ultimate thing at the big league level, it's been a process, and sometimes as fans, I think they want to see it happen immediately, and that's just not a reality. So these things take time. I believe that it did happen quick from when that new ownership and when Theo came in from back then to 2012 around to even 16. That was relatively quick.
Yeah,
to be able to win a world championship was kind of fast. But from my first year to right now, I mean, I've seen just continued growth, which is awesome. I'm definitely blessed to be on this in this organization, and just how they run things, how they let you be yourself, how they let you teach, and obviously they know who they're bringing in, so it kind of just goes hand in hand with what they're doing and then what they're trying to do. So it's been a blessing for me as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned that they let you sort of be an individual and teach what you want to teach. So one thing I've noticed in your bio that I think is really unique is that you went through Major League Scout School. So how do you feel like going through Scout School, and did you actually do any scouting throughout your career?
Throughout the career, you do it unknowingly, really. You are there, especially towards the end of my career, where maybe I wasn't playing as much, and you're just on the bench. And being a catcher, you just have a different perspective of the game. You're looking at so many things that you're just used to seeing. You're behind the play, you're seeing the whole field. And I know it's something that is said all the time, but it's true. Like, you see the positioning of the infielders, you see what the pitcher's doing, you see the outfielders, you see all these shifts that obviously are now happening now more than ever, but you saw all that. So that's just from behind the plate. So then being on the bench, I was also seeing all these things, seeing other players. What are they doing? What is this catcher doing? So there was some scouting going on there before
Yeah,
which
for
I
sure.
realized after. Especially going to scout school, it's kind of the things that I learned as to what to look for, and I said, okay. So it wasn't all completely new to me. It was like, okay, yeah, I've done that before. I didn't know I was doing that, and that kind of helped me just see things even from a scouting perspective, which helped me at that particular point. But then it's also helped me continuing into my coaching career, because again, especially as a manager, where I'm able to see, I have to see so many things other than just the pitcher now. I'm looking at where's our infielders, where are our outfielders, how are we lining up to this hitter, this pitcher, how are we throwing them. So there's so many things that are going into that part, which obviously isn't about mechanics or ability or any of that, but it's still the scouting part helped me in that area.
So did you go through scout school while you were still a player, it sounds like, or was that during your managerial career?
No, no, this was all after. All
Okay.
guys that go through this it's when you're done playing. Either the people that were at the scouting school at this time, which I went in 2005, I was done in 2004 playing. I went in 2005, and I believe each organization at that time was able to invite uh, two people, two candidates for the scout school, and I went as part of with the Boston Red Sox. That's who invited me, and that's how I went. So it was all after I played and before I actually got into coaching.
Okay, gotcha. The way you're talking about, your vision of the field and behind the plate, I was like, man, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if anyone's ever gone through scout school while they're still playing. Not that that would make a lot of sense from a, but it seems like it could be a relevant skill set, almost like continuing education for like a player, especially as a catcher. And I know
Yeah,
we
no
talked a little
doubt.
bit off camera or off audio about your ability as a catcher and what kind of catcher you are. So can you speak to that a little bit? So I know you were and are a guy who prides himself on defense, both as a player and now your players. But what kind of catcher were you, and how have you seen the catching profession changing? With analytics and all the interesting stuff I'm sure the Cubs are doing. How have you seen what? Let me rephrase this in a little bit shorter question, but what kind of catcher were you, and how have you seen the catching position change since in your 25 years in the game?
Well, I was a guy who really took pride in the position. I really that was my number one thing, and it wasn't anything that I put hitting aside, but that was just what I had in my heart. I believe I was drafted because of my catching first, and then the ability I had to get better at everything else. So that was very something very important to me. If if there was a ball in the dirt, my focus was I'm gonna block this ball. That was how I thought, and if I didn't, I was bothered at myself. Where sometimes you see again, this game has become offensive, and nothing wrong with that, but you see where sometimes it happens where a ball might get by a catcher, and who knows if he's really upset or not, but we don't know. Sometimes it's like, that just happened. I'll wait for my next at bat. That type mentality where
Yeah.
I didn't have that. I just had I took tremendous pride into the position, into what I was trying to accomplish back there, and ultimately it was the relationship I had with the pitcher, the trust that I built with him, and their ability to make the right pitch, knowing that, all right, this guy, he's gonna block this pitch. I'm gonna throw it, and I would remind them of that. I'd go out there in our conversations, if it's me going to the mound or before the game or in between innings, I would remind them, that I got you here, it was that type of thing. And again, that's something I took pride in, just because it was on the defensive part.
Do you feel like you had a big mentor in your life when you were a young player who sort of instilled that in you, or did you just sort of always have that kind of bulldog mentality behind the plate regarding your defense?
I believe that kind of comes from within. I did have some guys that I just watched. One of the biggest ones was Tony Pena. And I didn't know him at the time. Just watching how he played. I mean, that guy's had so much energy, passion, and obviously not even knowing him as a person, but just seeing that, and it's just a guy I always looked up to. I knew he was from where I was from, Dominican Republic, same town where my parents are from. Like all that was kind of, I was learning as I was getting more into baseball, and especially into the catching position. So it was kind of, it was there, because you have to have that within you, and then you do see other players that display that same type of what you feel passionate for. You see them displaying it, and that's just, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. And it's not necessarily that I said, this is what I want to be. It just kind of, all right, you see that, and that just kept building. That just kept building.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what it becomes.
So now we have tons of analytics, and TrackMan grades pitches and grades framing. Do you see catchers changing because of that? And the way you teach catching today, is it starting to change, or has it changed significantly since maybe even just 5 years ago?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I believe that's so important. That is information that is there for us. How can we not take that information and now try to make the catchers better, that catching position better? So what I am seeing, and it's something that from when I started playing, we talked about, all right, receiving the ball well, giving a good view to the umpire. That's how it was talked about back then, right? So we were still doing these same things, but now we have all this information. So we're trying to take this information and now just make better what we have been doing. And I believe we're adjusting our routines, our drills, in order to make these things better. So I think it has changed, because there's a bigger spotlight on it now, as opposed to before. There really wasn't anything that was out there. It was within the catching department. So if you had a catching coach and you were working and they were talking about this, but that was it. It just stayed there. And now it's a stat. It's something that is really looked at now. So when even scouts and other teams are evaluating other players, they're looking at that. Why? Because now that is helping the pitching side of it, which is ultimately that a catcher is there to help the pitcher. Obviously, he's doing his own thing, but he's helping the pitcher. So if we can get more pitches, then that's going to help us as a whole, but just individually as catchers as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember I think it was my second season, I played with a catcher who had spent like a couple seasons in big league camp each year. He was a high draft pick, and I remember throwing a fastball way down into a lefty. A pitch that like out
Hmm.
of my hand, just like watching it, like I knew it was a ball, like it was going to be a couple
Hmm.
inches below the strike zone, and then he just sort of vacuumed it up and just stuck it right at the bottom of the zone. It was a called strike, and like I distinctly remember that pitch because my mind was blown. I'm like, wait, no, that was a ball, and now it's a strike, and that's I think a power, like a superpower that catchers have that a lot of
No
like I
doubt.
didn't know that was a thing that existed until he did that in that game. And that game he probably got me 5 extra strikes. And as
There
you
you
know,
go.
the difference between that 1-1 fastball getting me to 2-1 versus now 1-2 is everything
Wow.
because now I can bounce a curveball, I can punch that guy out. It's just so many. It just completely changes the complexion of an at bat. So it's one of those things that you don't even know it's there even at high levels until you've got a guy that can do that stuff. And it's like you said, it's mind blowing. It can make a pitcher so much better, just those handful of strikes per game. And I mean, I know towards the end of my career, the more I realized how much catchers were doing for me, the more I appreciated them because, like, man,
Hmm.
like I need those extra strikes. They can be pivotal. If you have the bases loaded and
That's
you're
right.
looking for that ground ball and you can get to 1-2 instead of 2-1, that could change that whole inning and change the whole game. And
That's
get you
right.
out of that jam instead of you just get stuck in that jam. So
That's right.
I'm excited to have a catcher on the show because there's so much stuff like that goes on behind the scenes. Can you speak a little bit to the emotional intelligence that you have to have as a catcher to calm pitchers down, to sort of get the best out of them? Like you said, you said you'd go up there after blocking a ball and be like, "Hey, I got you." Like, what kind of stuff would you see and do, and when would you kind of go out for a visit? Tell me about like corralling the pitcher as an emotional creature.
I think for me it was always you had to know the pitcher. You had to know how he is as a person. What's his personality. So there's more than just what happens on the field. That's how you get to know your pitching staff. You hang out with them, you have conversations, so you know their personality to begin with. And then you're looking as things are happening in the game. How are they handling? Because things can speed up, things can get out of hand real quick in a baseball game, especially at higher levels when things begin to speed up even more rapidly than at lower levels. So I believe it's knowing when to go out there, which now I tell my young catchers, I explain situations and not always during the game. Sometimes it's after the game or even before a game as to who's pitching. Hey, know when you have to go out there and calm them down. And we talk about those situations. Those were things that were said to me. So I believe in, yeah, that works. Let me tell that to the catchers because they may not know to do that. So you go out there and you also know their personality. So now all right, what do I have to tell him in this situation? Do I gotta calm him down? Do I gotta kick him in the butt a little bit? Do I gotta get him going? So again, that goes back to how well do I know my pitcher, his personality, and what do I have to do to get the best out of him?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there's times where you have to kind of go out there and just challenge a guy, like challenge his manhood, be like, "Hey, man, let's go." You don't have your. I'm sure there's tons of times you've done that where, like you said, it's almost like, and I don't think people appreciate the psychology and the, like I said, the emotional intelligence of catchers sometimes because they'll go out and they'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to hear at that moment to like
Hmm.
get you in gear. I had a pitching coach one time came out. I was in the seventh or eighth inning, and our closer was starting to get loose. It was a tight game, and he came out and he's like, you know, maybe we should go to our closer here. He's like, it's a tight game, and your pitch count's getting up there. And he was just like, clearly, I'm like, dude, I know what you're doing. Like, you're just baiting me to tell you that I want to stay in, that I can get this
Yeah.
guy out. Like, I know what you're doing, but it was still like kind of the right thing to do. Did you ever have any like moments where you did something like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's always times where you go out there and say, "Look, you're the guy in this moment." I wouldn't say anything other than trying to build them up. It wasn't anything trying to tear them down. But look, you're the guy. You're the one who's out there. We want you out here, and that's even something I would tell my pitchers now. If I give them the ball, say, "Look, you know what? You're the guy I want right here. Let's go. You got this." Give them the ball, and I walk off. it's about giving them the confidence that you have trust in what they're able to do and what they can do. And I believe that plays a huge part in what they are. Any pitcher comes in, you come in a situation, and things can get tough. You can come in a situation where runner on third base, and you're the guy. You got to do this, or you don't. So I think building the pitchers up and giving them what they need mentally more than anything is powerful, and it really helps them to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so I can imagine a lot of the stuff that you learned and did and observed as a catcher is probably just making everything that you do as a manager easier, because obviously you're having a lot of these meetings. But do you only go out to the mound? It's just my own curiosity. I know most times pitching coaches just go out and do all the visits and you just take guys out. But do you ever have like strategic visits with your pitchers, or do you leave that all to your pitching coach?
No, there are times when that does happen. So let's say I have a situation where we're going to go out, or I'm going to go out. I'll ask the pitching coach. I say, hey, anything you want me to tell him from his, is there anything he sees? Because I'm going to go out right now. I have a reason to go out, whether it's to bring in the infielders, tell him something, talk about the situation, talk about this hitter, or what do we need to do. So I'll ask him. No, he'll say, no, nothing, or hey, remind him something, whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
I'll go out there, and again, what is that? That's, for me, that's just I'm trying to calm the situation down, build him up, let the other guys know, all right, if this happens, we're going to go here, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. All right, here we go, let's do it. And then head out. So that is the same type of thing that a catcher can go out there and do. Obviously, they're going to do it a little bit better, a little bit more often the older they are, when they get to know those strategies and the pitchers and all those things. But yes, I do go out there and do that. It doesn't happen all the time where I go out in the time where the pitching coach usually does, but it does happen.
Gotcha. One thing I'm really curious about is, how do you break up the duties? Because obviously on a minor league team, you have lots of different coaches. I think there's probably more coaches than ever as far as some of the more unique things, and guys sort of have like these hybrid positions and coordinators. But if you could walk me through the sort of the day-to-day of what you do and what you delegate to your coaches. Like, are you active with the hitters? Like, are you active with the catchers, or do you guys have a catching coach? Just take me through kind of the staff and what you guys do and how you all break up the coaching duties for your squad.
Okay, so we have a hitting coach, a pitching coach, what is titled as an assistant coach, and then obviously myself, the manager. And each one does have a role. Each one does play a role in our routine, our daily routine. So the first thing that we'll do, and then every day is different. So we'll have an early work schedule, and it might be infielders, it might be hitting, and it might be catching, whatever it is. So that's done. So if it's catching, obviously that's my department. So I would handle the catchers, and it's usually about 20 to 30 minutes max, and that's 30 minutes would be on the high end of an early work session. And you have anywhere from 2 to 3 catchers on a team. Lower levels usually have about 3, but it's just going over some of the detail stuff. So we'll have that, and at the same time, there could be the outfielders might be in the outfield, or with the assistant coach doing some outfield drills. And this is all part of our early work time slot, which is usually about 20 minutes to 45 minutes total. Some guys, the outfielders, might have started a little bit later. And then the hitting is also going on at the same time. So again, this is all going on during our early work time.
And that's typically like 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a 7 o'clock game?
Yeah, roughly 1:30 to 2 o'clock start times, depending on the season. As the season progresses and we do a little bit less, we might start a little bit later, those type things. Because you got to take those things into account. How are these guys performing? How are they feeling? What are we seeing? Are they looking tired? Do we have to give them a blow? Those types of things. So those are all things that come on me. So I have to see those things, and I talk to the staff. I ask them what they're seeing. And then we kind of adjust our schedule according to that. So then our pitchers are doing their thing with the pitching coach. Catchers are there, obviously catching the sides. Then that is all done. Then we start the normal everybody's included type of thing where everybody's stretching, everybody's getting ready. We might do a team fundamental if we're doing bunt plays, and if that's the fundamental of the day, then that's what we're really honing on for a solid 15 minutes. So it's not much longer than that, 15 to 20 minutes max, where each pitcher is going through it one at a time. One at a time, we're doing the play. And if we mess that up or if we do something kind of out of whack, we'll stop right there. We'll talk about it and then keep it going. And that's how you really get those fundamentals down. It's just really do it. I'm big on bump plays and pitchers fielding their position, that type thing, because those are things that are big in the game. So, and then after that, we go right into our BP, our normal BP. We usually have about 3 to 4 groups of BP, and then it's take a break, and that's when the other team takes the field, and then it's game time.
Yeah, I think the average fan doesn't realize how much is actually done and how long the day actually is for a minor league squad. I mean, they're in the ballpark, like you said, 1:30, every day for a 7 o'clock game, and they're going home 11:30 or jumping on the bus. It's a long day. There's a lot of stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
So I want to backtrack a minute. I want to go back through your story, and one of the things I'm really interested to hear from you is what it was like to be a first rounder. So, as we go back through your bio, you played 14 seasons of pro baseball, now entering your 7th as a coach. You've been around tons of guys who are in the big leagues. You're up to TripleA a number of times yourself, so you're always knocking on the door. But you were a pro baseball player at 18 after being, the 40th overall pick of the Astros. And I just can't imagine the mental circus that's got to be. Just for every person involved. I mean, there's so much media hype around you, scouts at every game. That's just got to be an immensely high-pressure situation for a young man. And then to start your career with all these expectations at 18, traveling around. So I'd love to hear your story about being a first-rounder, and I'm sure there's tons of kids and parents who would just be fascinated to hear what that experience is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it all started my junior year in high school. That was the first time that I was approached by a pro scout. He gave me his business card, and that's when I realized, wow, this is real. This can happen. I always dreamed of playing baseball, but I didn't know so much about the profession of it. Just baseball. Let's go play baseball. So then I got approached by a scout, and that's when I knew this is real. This is something that I can do and that I'm going to do. So then that's my junior year. Going into my senior year, now scouts are everywhere. So I was a little bit nervous. I can't lie. I was seeing all these scouts at the game, and I knew that they were there to see me. They were contacting me before, talking to me after. So it was a little nerve-wracking to see these guys there. But again, I still went out there and just did my thing. And then coming up to the actual draft, again, not knowing anything about first round, second, all that stuff. I had no idea. I just knew that these guys now were showing much more interest. They're coming to my house. They're meeting my parents, that whole thing. But to me, it was still about, all right, baseball. I want to play baseball. Next thing you know, all right, hey, you got to be ready by the phone because you're going to get a phone call. Okay, so I'm home waiting, and next thing you know, I get this call, that I was picked by Houston. I was compensation pick, 40th overall. Great. It was an excitement, just knowing that I was going to play. Again, it wasn't even about where I was picked. I wasn't thinking much about that. Or then, you get the whole signing bonus, that whole thing, which is another deal. But it was just about, I was excited to play baseball. Wow, I couldn't wait. News people were at my house. I went into different media outlets and did some interviews, things of that nature. So there was a lot of things going on. Obviously, nothing like now. You're a first rounder now, and it is 1,000 times different. Totally bigger. I believe now that pressure that they have now is 100 times more than what I dealt with because of there wasn't as much media outlets. It wasn't even things like this podcast and so many avenues of internet and everything that is out there now. So we had a telephone, a house line, so it was that. It was
Yeah.
either that or that's it, so it wasn't as big as it is now, but it was still kind of an excitement that built. So I had all that. So then the whole negotiation started, which was another deal. I had someone kind of negotiating for us, and I actually was getting tired of that whole process because all I wanted to do, all I had in my mind was I just want to play baseball, So we're going back and forth about money and this and that, and that's just the business part of it now, So they're gonna offer you this, you have an agent kind of fighting for you, getting more, doing all that. Finally, it was like I told the agents, look, I just want to get this over with and play. So we finally came to an agreement, and that was it. And then not too long after that, I was off to our spring training site in Florida, which was another thing. 18 years old, I'm leaving home really for the first time by myself. No big deal. There was some tears shed. Yeah, no problem. I get to Florida. I'm there, and now it hits me. I wake up the first morning. And it was like I had these butterflies in my stomach. I was like, where am I? What am I doing? This is all when I woke up. I set my alarm. I still remember the song that came on when I woke up that morning, and it was like, wow, just a nervous feeling. All right, so I get together with these guys. We go to the park. Now it's starting to go away. I'm seeing the baseball field. I'm seeing we're in the locker room. We're changing. And as soon as we were on the field, it was like it was all gone. There was no more nerves. That what I felt like waking up, it was just gone. And I remember that so clear because of what I felt at the beginning, waking up and that whole process of just what I had gone through to get to there. The whole draft, the whole negotiations, the whole leaving home, the homesick part, all that stuff. And then finally getting to the ballpark, and now you're doing what you've been wanting to do. And it was such a overwhelming feeling, but a good one when it finally got to that.
So I had this as you were talking. I had this like picture of you, and you mentioned like the house phone of you like with the cord stretched all the way out of the kitchen. You're like in the bathroom. Your mom's like, Jimmy, who are you talking to? Mom, shut up! It's the Yankees. It's the Astros. Yeah, this was a very different time back in 1991. So how did you handle it with your teammates? Like, what did your teammates think of all that?
You know what? I don't know what they thought. We didn't really, it wasn't talking about that whole thing. Now you're just baseball players. Now you're just together with these guys. And again, to me, I wasn't so caught up in where I was picked. It was now that I'm just here and we're together, we're playing. That's how I looked at it, and things we talked about wasn't about, hey, you were drafted here, or, what'd you sign for? It was none of that. It was, hey, we're doing this. What are you doing after? Let's get together. Let's go swimming. Let's go. It was that type of chemistry that we were building as a team, as a unit, and obviously you're not hanging out with every single guy. You got your friends that you get along with and guys that you're a little bit closer with. And that's just how it built. And that's just how it continued throughout my whole playing career. So, I've built friendships that to this day, I am still in contact with those guys from year one, and even as the years went on, that I still have very close friends that I am in contact with. So it was a huge, a great experience, a huge part of my life that still is part of it today.
So you're of Dominican descent. So
Yes.
did you have that? Could you flow between sort of like the American guys and the Dominican guys? Because in a clubhouse, there's always a dynamic, right? With the, maybe it's just where you're from, or maybe it's, speaking English is your first language, your second language. But could you kind of flow between the groups, or like what was your dynamic with all the guys?
Yeah, no, I did exactly that because obviously being born here, being American, speaking English, speaking Spanish fluently, knowing their culture, knowing what they had gone through. And because at the time, my parents didn't speak English either. So I was always there helping them, and we'd get mail, and I had to read the mail and tell my parents what it was. So I kind of knew what that part was from a player's perspective, where they're in this country and they don't understand the culture, the language. So I would help them there, even at 18. And but I'm with the American guys the exact same way. We're talking about stuff that we do now as 18-year-olds, how we grew up, all that stuff. So for me, I was right in the middle of both. I wasn't obviously just hanging with one group. I had a group of friends on both cultures, Americans, Latins. It was, it really didn't matter. It was just, I just felt like I was a part of everybody,
Yeah.
and I know it was a blessing. I didn't realize it then, but that's how I was able to get along with all these guys and have relationships and communication because of that dynamic.
Yeah, I'm sure that, and I'm sure today that also, pays huge dividends. Not to mention the fact that you were a catcher all these years, and you could handle both guys from both cultures. So, as you grew up in the game, did you have any like major mentors, guys that kind of showed you how to be a pro and kind of showed you the ropes? And was there anyone who you feel like really steered you in a better direction? And if not for them, maybe you wouldn't have picked up on something as quite as fast, or maybe your whole career changed.
Yeah, those guys are always there, whether it be coaches or other players. Um, I mean, I had that with coaching, especially. I had Guy Conti, who was one of my coaches, and I met him later on. I met him in the year 2000, and just hearing him, he had already been in baseball years, and he was an older guy, an older man at the time, but just hearing his perspective, how calm he was on situations where I would ask him questions, he would tell me things, or sometimes I wouldn't have to ask anything. He's just coming out and telling me things. And this is at the DoubleA level. So I'm learning different things and hearing how he would handle this he was our pitching coach. So gosh, that was a huge learning curve. In 1997, I had Gary Allenson was my DoubleA manager, and I saw just kind of how he was, how he handled stuff, and I learned so much from him as well. Just seeing as a player, so I'm a player. I'm seeing how he is talking to us, how he's going over situations, and just his demeanor. And I was like, wow. As I began coaching, all these things are now coming back to me. How did these guys handle these situations? How did they address players? And then I had coaches who I believe weren't so good at how they address players. But that's going to happen everywhere. You're always going to have these guys who you really look up to, who really impacted you, and you're going to try to emulate what they did. So then as a player, I had the exact same things with other players. When I was playing, especially in winter ball in Dominican Republic, when I was playing with major leaguers and watching these guys, how they carried themselves, what they did on the field, and how they handled these situations. And I was always, and that's the whole scouting thing, where you're just observing, and then you're trying to, all right, I see how he did this. Let me try to implement that into my game, even though I didn't necessarily do it exactly how they were doing it, but in my mind, I was doing the exact same thing that he was doing. And those are things that helped me as a player. So yeah, those people, I believe, if you're open-minded, if you have a growth mindset, it allows you to see others and really learn from others, whether it be another player or another coach.
Yeah. And I imagine because you've played at every level in the minor leagues, and I imagine that it's really tough when you go from A ball to DoubleA or DoubleA to TripleA to sort of understand right away like what what new things lie ahead, and like what is the new standard, and what things you can and can't get away with. Can you speak a little bit to the levels in the minor leagues? And like you said, like when you first got to DoubleA, what did you quickly realize, for example, and maybe that first week, like, oh, I can't do this anymore and get away with it, or I need to call this type of sequence in this situation, or just elaborate a little bit on the different levels and how you experience them both as a player and as a manager.
I believe that the biggest jump for me, or the difference, was from A ball to DoubleA. In A ball, for one, you don't see many guys that had already been in the big leagues, let's say, unless it was just a rehab assignment for a game or two. When I got to DoubleA, there was already some guys who had been in the big leagues who, for some reason, might have been back at DoubleA or whatever. So you see just the playing experience becomes a little bit different. And that was back then where some older guys were in AAA, some guys, because they were older guys in AAA, a guy that might have gone back to DoubleA. And those were the reasons why you had some older guys. But I think that was the biggest jump. And one of the things for me was going over hitters and how are we going to pitch this guy, or this whole lineup. And that was where I really understood how much the meetings with the pitchers and the pitching coach, how important that was, because it was almost like overwhelming mentally. You're going over every hitter, you're going over the pitcher, you're going over all these things. And I remember being kind of mentally fatigued just from doing all that, going through a game behind the plate and remembering all these hitters. And okay, this guy, we got runners in scoring position, and we have to make sure we do this. We're going with the pitcher's strength here. This hitter's weakness is this. So always remembering all those things. It was a little taxing mentally, you know? So that was the first time where I really began to do that. Then it just became obviously easier. The first time making that adjustment was harder, you know? And that's why now, even me coaching at the A-ball level, we do that. You know, we throw that at them. And yes, they might feel the exact same way that I felt there, but now they're learning it at a younger age. So now that when they do get to DoubleA, or even in A ball, in high A, they're ready. They already know this isn't new to them. Yeah. So again, going back to the levels, you know, that was kind of just how it was. In A ball, you kind of went out there and you were working on stuff individually, and you always are as a player, but it was kind of that focus, and you know, you're trying to make sure you block balls, make sure you're working on your throwing mechanics. But there was a lot more of the mental side as you progressed in levels, and that's how I saw it. Where at A ball, I was working on certain things kind of individually, and we're talking with the pitchers, but not as much, you know, because those are things that we were learning. So
it sounds like better. At the younger levels, guys are still trying to clean up their physical game, and then once it's to a certain level and they can hit and they can put up the numbers that they need to put up, then maybe they get a chance at DoubleA and beyond. Is that an accurate way of looking at it?
Yeah. I mean, again, you are still doing these things at A ball, but or at least for me back then, it wasn't as much. You know, they were talking about certain things, but it was just kind of, it was thrown out there, something real quick. Don't forget about this. Then it became where it was more detailed. There was a strategy for every hitter, you know, and runners in scoring position and this. So that's when I was like, whoa, you know, and I remember feeling like just mentally fatigued. It had nothing to do with physical. And then you got the physical part after the game. So it was kind of both, you know. And so that was the biggest jump, where it was both physical and mental for me.
And is that in part because pitchers maybe can't execute pitches quite as well and at the A level, or the command's not there? Or when do you feel like they're really ready to even use some of those, you know, like, hey, we have a scouting report on every guy, we have a plan for every guy. Obviously, like, the plan doesn't matter if they can't execute pitches. Is that part of the thing that factors in that, you know, mental jump?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. So for me, being a manager at low A, like I was last year, okay, we have a plan that we're trying to execute. So the catcher knows, okay, we're trying to throw this particular hitter away. We set up on the outer half. But yeah, now the pitcher is trying to execute that, but it's probably 50-50 depending on the pitcher. Some guys can execute more than others. But we know that. We know that sometimes, okay, how did he get a hit? Well, maybe the pitcher didn't execute the pitch. So we know that they're not always going to execute the plan that's in hand because of their command. So that's something that happens at the lower levels. Now, once they start getting high A, which they're still working on, and even double A, where they're still working on things, but now they can we can implement a little bit more on the plan and trying to execute that plan.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, with me working with younger kids, I talk through, here's how you chow the plate. We have middle, we cut into halves, we go to thirds, and corners. And even then I know as a 12-year-old, it's good to get the gears turning.
No
but
doubt.
I know full well that, they're not going to be able to differentiate between outer half and outer third, but it just, as you probably know, it just takes so long. I mean, how many times do you have to tell a guy for it to finally stick, and then they finally get beat up in a game, and then it all clicks. So oh, now I get why I should have done this, and then it happens. You know what I mean? Like that learning curve is so long and so interesting. Were there any moments where you felt like during your playing career something happened and it just sort of expanded your mind? Like you gave up. Like for me, there's a walk-off home run I gave up where I was pitching against a guy in the Atlantic League, and he was just fouling balls off. I had the winning run on second. It was the ninth inning of a tie game, and he had played in the major leagues, and so I knew this. This was in the back of my mind as my scouting report, and he's just super late on all my fastballs, and I'm certainly he's just going to shorten up and punch him through the right side, and the game will be over. I'm not trying to. I'm playing to prevent a single, not just I'm not afraid of him taking me deep. So I switched pitches. I kind of ignored the fact that he was super late, threw him a curveball, threw it right down the middle of the plate, and he banged out a 2-run home run to lose the game. That for me, I'll never forget that moment because of just, how frustrated I was, but also just, it was the best teacher I could have had about never forget what the hitter's telling you right then at that moment. Not, irregardless of the scouting report, but were there any moments like that from your playing career, your coaching career, where maybe it just really stuck out and it kind of probably expanded your mind and helped you long term?
I think one of the times it's kind of similar to your story where I was playing in Dominican Republic and Julio Franco was hitting. And the report was, don't throw him inside. Keep everything on the outer half because he can get to the ball on the inside. Well, we're throwing away, and it's the same typical thing where he was fouling some balls off. So I know now my pitcher, this guy's mid-90s. You know what? Let's go fastball in. I call fastball in. Pitcher agrees. Yanks it right down the line for a double. Two-run score. And right there, I was like, man, I felt responsible because I knew I was going something different. Now, again, same type thing that, the hitter was showing me something that, okay, he was fouling this off, but he was still getting to it. But his strength was on the inside part. Don't go there. Let's stay away from that. Man. And obviously kind of that situation taught me, look, you have a plan, stick with it. And that's something that we teach now to even our hitters. You go up there with a plan, don't change it, because if you do, it's gonna go astray. It's gonna go off. It's gonna be crazy. So when we talk about approaches and plans, if you stick with it, obviously it's not always gonna work, but you're gonna have better results if you stick with your plan. So that was one of the key moments, and that was probably in the year 2000. So it was a later on in my career, but still one of those moments where, gosh, I remember going against a scouting report, and just taught me stick with it no matter what.
Yeah, even at 87 years old, Julio Franco could still pull a 96 mile per hour fastball, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
That dude. So were the rumors true? Like, what size bat was he swinging? You're probably like, oh man, he can't get this 38-inch bat around. He can't pull that
Yeah,
pitch.
it was how it was where he was standing, it was how he was hitting. It was just not. There's no way he's going to turn on this fastball with Varys on the mound. Boom, fastball in. He sure did. Right down the line. Right down the line.
And I think, and
So,
you could probably, testify to this, but like some of those guys, I feel like they can defy scouting reports because they're just so athletic and just so quick, and they have special things. Like I don't know, like Big Poppy seems like a good example. I know you played, with him, but a guy
hmm
where you're like, okay, there's just like no way he could after this sequence. Like, there's no way he can do this. But then he just resets and just like drives the pitch that just made sense, like you said, with kind of like with Julio. Do you see that with
hmm
some of those guys? They just can sort of like defy almost like a scouting report.
all the time because that's what when we talk about baseball players, especially high level baseball players, it's all about making adjustments, and they can make the adjustment pitch to pitch. And that's what we're trying to teach guys to be able to don't make the adjustment in a week. Don't make it tomorrow. Don't make it later on in the game. Make it right now. And that's what these guys do. Obviously, we're preaching that. We're trying to tell them that some guys can do it, others can't. Guys who have more experience, a Big Poppy, they can do that pitch to pitch. And they know the scouting reports. They know how they're going to be pitched. So it's not that they're giving into that, but they make adjustments based on that particular pitch or that particular situation. So yes, you see that constantly day in and day out.
So for you as a single A manager, what is your routine? I mean, you talk about having a plan and sticking to it. So obviously, you've got a ton of baseball acumen, a ton of baseball experience. You're, a growth mindset guy who's not afraid of the new shiny coat that baseball is wearing with all the analytics and stats. What is your plan for yourself that you're sticking with to try to, continue to climb the ranks as a coach and hopefully one day be a big league manager?
Well, I think it's just, you go out there and you have these plans on what you're working with players. You have this plan on how you're trying to execute this game, right? Obviously, at the level that I'm at right now, again, we're working on developing these players. So they might be working on certain pitches. So that's where, all right, we know that we have to do that, But once the game goes on, I don't care who it is at what level, you want to win. You want to go out there and you want to win this game. So what I do is I try to put these players in the best position to succeed, and that's mentally. Those are the meetings we have, and that's physically out there, bringing the pitcher in where we know he has to pitch, but you know what? It wouldn't be helpful to him to bring him in right now. Let's wait for maybe the next hitter. So those are things where you're still trying to use strategic things, and obviously this is all based on we know a lot nowadays. There's so much information that we have even at the minor league level, where yes, the players don't have the same amount of experience, but we still have their numbers from college if they went to college, the last couple of years of pro ball if they were in for the last couple of years. So we have those stats, so they do have some tendencies that they do. So we are trying to put our players or our pitchers in that particular case in a position to succeed. So I'm using the information that we have, but I'm also using what I'm seeing, because I believe you have to have both. You have to use both. If you don't use the information, I don't think you're getting the full effect. If you don't use what you're seeing, you're also not getting the full effect. So you have to be able to combine both those things, the analytics and then kind of what you're seeing and what you're feeling, because the analytics isn't going to show you, if that guy's fatigued for this day or what he did the day before or anything like that. So that's where you got to kind of see that. Obviously, the numbers, what's going on there, and then that's where you'll see guys are using their own instincts to make a decision. So that's one thing I'm trying to continue to do. Use what I'm seeing and use the information to put our guys in the best position to succeed.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite stat or a favorite new thing that's kind of opened your eyes and maybe helps you see the game in a new light. I'll give you an example for myself. So when I was playing in my last couple years, they had some advanced statistics for us, and I looked through them and I was like, like batting average for balls in play, I wonder what that is. And all these other ones, I wonder what that is. And I started looking at them, and I remember just for me, batting average for balls in play was something that I used mentally to right myself when maybe I was running just bad. Like, all right, my BA BIP is 450 right now. Like it, and I'm not pitching bad, so I'm probably just going through a little bit of bad luck. So just like pat myself on the back, like just stay the course, Dan, like that kind of thing. And, like it'll level out a little bit. You're just running bad a little bit right now. Like that for me mentally as a pitcher, just seeing that there is variability in the game. There is some bad luck. And here it is like in front of you. Just keep doing your thing, and it'll sort of normalize. That stat like gave me some mental comfort, and it helped me get through slumps a little bit. Is there anything like on the catching side or hitting side or pitching side that you feel like that you're like, I'm glad this stat exists. I like looking at this. This has kind of changed my outlook on the game.
Yeah, for sure. I use a lot of that stuff for every position when it comes to defense, the hitters. When I make lineups, I know all this the day before. So for tomorrow's lineup that night, I'm looking at, all right, who are we facing? And I go into all the numbers. How does he pitch against righties? How does he pitch against lefties? What is the batting average against? All that stuff, walk ratio, strikeout ratio, all that stuff. And now, yes, I have players that have to play, but I have some guys that I can kind of platoon. And you know what? I'm going to go with this guy because he does better against this type of pitcher. So I do those things. It's not just, all right, here it is, go out there. And again, that goes back to, I want my guys to succeed. So if I know this guy's going to struggle, unless he just, he has to play and he's just going to go out there. But if I have a choice between two guys and you know what, this guy's going to succeed better off of this guy and this guy's not, then I'll go with this guy. So I use all those numbers. The hitting ones, I start simple. What's their strikeouts? What are their walks? I use that also with the catcher so that they know each hitter. I post on the board in the dugout the hitter's walks, the hitter's strikeouts, the hitter's average, all that stuff, number of at bats. These guys are prone to strike out. Remember that. Keep that in mind. The reason why they're striking out is they're probably committing to pitches that they should lay off, but they can't. So there's a lot of little stats, and these are constant things that I am reminding our catchers, our infielders, whether to shift or move, because we don't just shift them from the dugout. We talk to them before. This guy has a tendency of this. His stats show that he does this. So we're trying to implement that and show that to these guys. And again, that's part of the learning thing. But yeah, to answer the question, I use all these numbers to make lineups, to put hitters and players in the best position to succeed.
So that's a good answer. I mean, I know there's so much information available to you, so just trying to sift through it, I'm sure, is a daunting task just on a day-to-day basis. So when you guys shift, so number one, the shifting thing is fascinating because you don't see, like, do they all have like a wrist guard on and they're like, okay, I got to go 16 inches to my left and to my right. And I know shifting is becoming more and more common in minor league baseball. Can you take me through like the nuts and bolts of getting a shift? Like, how do you get guys to go into the right position? Who do they look to? Do you have like lots of meetings on this? How do they know to be exactly where you guys want them to be?
Well, we do both things. We have traditional ways of, they're always constantly looking in the dugout, and we have a coach who's moving them left or right or telling them where to go. They also have to know based on the pitch. So there's certain pitches they might play a little bit more to the pull side. If it's fastball off speed, they're going to kind of shade off a little in the opposite direction. But they're constantly looking in. You're seeing now, even at the big league level, where these guys have cards in their pockets. And they're taking out cards and looking. And that is all based on the hitters, what their tendencies are, and where they have to play. So obviously that's now coming into the minor leagues as well. I saw a team last year at our level with cards in their pockets. And they were pulling out the cards and they were shifting to those, what the cards were telling them to do. So that is another big part of this game. We don't necessarily use cards, but I don't see why we wouldn't in the future, perhaps, to keep up with all that.
That's pretty interesting. You could have like a grounds crewman run out and just like spray paints a diagram in front of the shortstop before the inning, and then he like scratches it out with his cleats before he runs out so the opponents can't see it. But just procedurally, that seems, like the game moves so fast. I mean, even though it's a slow game compared to some others, it still moves so fast. And I was always curious as what guys are now doing as this thing is, you could potentially shift on every hitter in an inning, and they're not small shifts anymore either. I mean, are you seeing more big shifts at the minor league level, or is it still kind of small stuff like with the pitch with just like a little bit?
No, I'm seeing huge shit. I'm seeing what you see in the major leagues. I saw last year at Low A, Midwest League. And it's not every team, but you're seeing guys. So even the little shifts aren't as little anymore. They're a little bit bigger. But some of them were doing like big league shifts where the third baseman is almost at the shortstop area. The shortstop is on the other side of second base, and like those types of shifts. And it doesn't always work at that level. Again, why? Because the pitcher can't execute as well.
Yeah.
But it does. If he's close to what he has to do, and the hitter does what he has a tendency of doing, then I did see it work a lot. So, and that's where baseball is going. Okay, so if you're apt to doing this, then okay, I'm gonna play to that. Because I'm gonna get an advantage. I'm gonna get you out. So, and again, that's what this whole thing is coming to. How can I succeed? What information can I use to succeed? And that's where this is going. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
And who draws these shifts up? So is it you? I mean, like when you have this full report on a whole team, like you got, all right, 14 or 12 potential hitters from the opponents. Who makes like, all right, this is the official chart for, Tommy Smith on the other team? Like who makes that?
We come together as a staff. So it's our infield coach, whoever is running that infield part, and we talk about, okay, this guy we're gonna play him there. So we have all that written down. We'll go over it with each individual infielder, and it's something quick. It's nothing too overwhelming, but then they know. So they know that in their mind, but they're still peeking in. So if they don't necessarily shift where we want them to, we'll direct them to go a little bit more. And they know how many steps they need to take based on what we tell them. So
Gotcha.
all that is being communicated before and even during the game so that they know where to play. Gotcha.
So it's one part high-tech analysis, the other part screaming at the infielders, getting their attention. Yeah. But what's funny about the shifting thing is, and I know you and I'm probably from one of the last generations who still played like baseball in their backyard. I'm sure you played just tons and tons of it as a kid, but we shifted all the time playing backyard baseball. Like if your buddy comes up who just yanks the ball all the time, like everyone's over on that side of the field. It's nothing new. Like kids are smart, and
that's
just
right.
Thinking back to like those backyard games, it's interesting how it parallels, because when your only job is to like not let your buddy get a hit, like you do whatever you feel like doing, and it's kind of funny. So as we kind of wrap up, what advice would you have for young catchers and parents of catchers and coaches who obviously have a number of catchers they're trying to develop as best they can? What advice would you have with all your experience and the way the game's changing, for a young catcher who might have your ear for a couple minutes?
I think we get so caught up into the three core things, right? Receiving, blocking, and throwing, which you can never get away from. But there's so many other little details when it comes to mental, when it comes to why am I doing this? So pay attention to all those little details and always be open and ask questions when it comes to, if you're supposed to do this, why should I do this? To have an idea, because I see a lot of young catchers where all they're trained to do is look in the dugout, get a sign, put it down. Okay, why? And they don't necessarily have to ask, but they can ask themselves, okay, he's calling a fastball. Why would it be a fastball? And this is all things that are going to help them as they continue to grow as young players, because obviously they're not going to always know or even ask that question. But if they are beginning to think of those things, now you get to that point where you're in high school, and now, like you said earlier, things just click, or you get into college and something just clicks, and now it's not something you're just hearing for the first time. All right, this is something I thought about when I was 12 years old. This is something my coach told me when I was 13. Now I understand, fully, because I've thought about it. I've worked on that type of thing. That's a lot of the mental side, of course, but there's certain things that they can do to always just keep learning aside from receiving, blocking, and throwing. So there's so much more, and just be open and ask questions as to why we're doing certain things and have reasonings for it.
All right, so I want to thank Jimmy for being on the show today. He had a ton of great info to share. Obviously, a wealth of information in the game. As a catcher, being that general, seeing everything that's happening on the field, you could just tell how much he has learned about the game, both as a player and as a coach. So, Jimmy, how can people follow up with you this year? I heard you got promoted, so congratulations, number one.
Thank you very much.
And you're with the. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a Twitter account. It's at Gonzo3131, and obviously all the media outlets that the teams have, we usually get those if someone reaches out, and they'll usually let me know if it's something that I don't have, and I'm always willing to help any young players need any information.
And so you're the Myrtle Beach Pelicans manager this upcoming year. So
yes, sir.
Looking forward to I don't know if it's more warm weather. I guess you'll have a warmer spring, right? But
yes.
Then it'll be a pretty warm summer.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. It's a Midwest League. It's hit or miss. You could have a decent day. You could have a day where it's just snowing, rainy, cold. So I'm not going to miss that part. I'll be honest with you, of the Midwest League. But you know what? The weather was never really that bad throughout the whole season. We had those extremes in the beginning with cold, but it wasn't too bad as the season went on. So, and I know Myrtle Beach does get a little bit hot and humid. So, but that's all right. I think I'll take that over the cold.
Yeah, for sure. Should be an awesome experience. So definitely follow up. I'll put Coach Gonzalez's Twitter handle, and I'll put a link to the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, where he'll be managing this year, in the description of the podcast and the YouTube. So definitely follow up with him. And thanks again. This is an awesome conversation. I wish you luck in the upcoming season.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, that wraps up for this week. I want to thank again my guest, Coach Jimmy Gonzalez. Be sure to go support the Myrtle Beach Pelicans if you're in the South Carolina area, and definitely follow up with him on social media. And just remember that this is a guy who back in 1991 was drafted, was a first-round pick, and continues to evolve and continues to be open to learning. He talked a ton about growth mindset and just being willing and able to accept some of the changes that are happening in baseball. Baseball is changing faster now than it ever has before. And I think a lot of coaches who played such a long time in a slightly different generation could easily, be overwhelmed by some of this stuff, or be unable to, accept the way the game is just progressing and evolving. But you can just tell that he's interested and excited at accepting the new things while marrying it with his experience as a player and just sort of finding a harmonious balance. And it seems like he's a great manager who would find unique ways to get the best out of his players. So thanks again for being here. Be sure to share the show with a friend, like it, leave a comment, and don't forget to jump on my website, sign up for my email list. You can also find links below in the show notes and description. That way you'll be one of the first to know when I release a new vlog, a new podcast, a new pitching video, article, and you'll get updates on my upcoming book, Dear Baseball Gods, which will be released on April 15th. So thanks again, and we'll see you here next week.